I wouldn't go in there unless you have a strong stomach. We have orders to leave everything just the way it was until the investigation into the chapel attack is finished.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Greatest Generation, and today, as previously announced, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite games of all time, a game that brought me back into gaming after I'd kind of had a PC renaissance in the mid-2000s, and then I kind of dropped off of video games for a couple months, and, you know, right after high school, and just kind of did my own thing. And that game, of course, as I have over here 2 copies of, this game, I think I actually have a 3rd and a 4th somewhere as well, is the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. I have the collector's edition of the game, and you'll notice as I hold both these up, I also have the 5th anniversary edition of the game. You'll notice in here, and this is going to be one of the talking points of this video, that both of them have different ratings. The game was released on March 20th, 2006 under a T rating. Later, the ESRB had to re-rate the game due to the fact that some hackers basically got into files on the game on PC and were essentially able to render female characters in the game and NPCs topless. So, like the hot coffee mod with GTA, that kind of changed the rating for the game. So other than that, it's actually kind of surprising, and I was surprised back in 2006 when I first got the game, that the game was T instead of M, simply because it had so much blood and violence and gore and just overall a darkness in the game that you wouldn't expect from something rated T, at least up to that point. By today's standards, it's definitely more passable than a game that you would have played a while ago. I'm actually opening up my collector's edition here to kind of show some of the cool stuff in it. So I have one of the Cyrodiil coins, never opened, which is cool. One of the many maps. If I could pan the camera around in my room, I would. I actually have directly above from where I'm sitting, up above me, I have this very map plastered on my ceiling, and then over another part of my room on the ceiling, I have another map. For whatever reason, somehow I was able to gather a bunch of maps from this game the course of years and stuff. The collector's edition was also pretty cool because it came with this journal thing that basically shows like it has a ton of information about the world and stuff. Really cool, really fascinating that this was included in it. It also has a making of DVD in the game itself, and it kind of folds out into this nice thing right here. Very, very cool stuff. Obviously, I then have this 5th anniversary edition of the game. So this one's actually really cool. It has a steel case. It comes with the Game of the Year version of the game, which is pretty cool. It has another pretty thick manual. I actually have my original receipt from when I bought this in here. It comes with yet another map. I have a ton of these maps from this game. And then also a DVD. I actually have never watched the DVDs. I actually cannot say if the DVD is the same as the one in that collector's edition. It probably is, but I've actually honestly never watched it. I should sit down and watch it, being I'm such a huge, massive fan of this game. The story of Oblivion for me was kind of the story of me rediscovering my love of console video games and stuff. From like 2002 to 2004, it was the first time my family had gotten a not shitty home computer, and I kind of transitioned from, at that point I owned a PS2 and I owned a GameCube, but I kind of transitioned out of that. There were games that I played definitely in that era, but I kind of just transitioned into playing games on PC instead. Games like Warcraft 3 and Unreal Tournament 2003, Unreal Tournament 2004 were big and huge experiences for me. The original Half-Life 2 came out through that. So there were a lot of games that I played during this time, and this was the first game that really brought me back. Console video gaming. I'd kind of dropped out of it, and I was really into the PC thing. And as I always say, like every every person that's a video gamer in their life has the PC renaissance, and that's something that I had early on. And even though now I have a gaming PC, is what I record all these videos and stuff on, not really drawn to it as much as a console. I like the simplicity of sitting down and just popping a disc in and playing a game, not having to dick around with graphical options and drivers and all that kind of bullshit. Just something I'm not really interested in anymore. Not to say that I dislike PC gaming either. There's definitely ways to go on PC. Obviously, I recently played Mass Effect Andromeda on PC, and that was the way to play that game. Probably most likely going to be playing Prey, the upcoming Prey game on PC. So there are reasons, but that's not what this video is about. I had seen it. I want to say I saw it in EGM. I had an EGM subscription for a long time. Game Informer and EGM. Electronic Gaming Monthly was a huge magazine for me, and even through the 1UP stuff before that kind of dissolved into nothing. I was a huge 1UP guy and a huge EGM guy. I had started seeing screenshots and pictures in this magazine of the upcoming Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. During the PC days, I had dropped off of playing console games and stuff, and I'd started reading about the Xbox 360, obviously, and this new game called Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. During this time, I had rented for the original Xbox Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and I just couldn't get into it. It's extremely buggy. I'm sure at the time it was a better PC experience, but that wasn't what I was playing it on, and I just I was not into it. I didn't like it. I liked the appeal of it being very open-ended, but I couldn't get into it. There was just something about the world and the graphics. It just didn't click for me. Looking at stuff online and seeing videos and clips and pictures and screenshots of Oblivion, I was really intrigued and interested in a way, and it's actually the reason that I bought an Xbox 360 at launch. Originally, the game was intended as a launch title, and that's why I bought the machine, and then obviously it got delayed by a couple months, and it didn't come out till the following March. I was a little bummed, and obviously I played 360 launch games like Perfect Dark Zero and Call of Duty 2, and the criminally underrated Condemned Criminal Origins, which will be on this show at some point, because that's a fantastic game that I wish more people talked about, and I wish it would come back. But I digress. So, for me, the story that I always love to tell about Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion and why I'm so passionate about the game is, I remember going to Best Buy, picking the game up day one. I didn't reserve the game or anything like that. I knew it was coming out, and it was the kind of thing like I didn't have it reserved because it had gotten pushed, and it was kind of the thing where I don't know if it's coming out yet or not. So I picked up the game on launch day and then drove to my friend's house, and we sat down to play the game. And I mean, you got to think back then, like this was the first 6 months of the Xbox 360 had been out, and even though it had the ability to be put on high definition TVs, most people are still playing on standard CRT monitors and stuff. So we sat down, we loaded up the game, got through the tutorial area, and I wasn't really initially thrilled with it. Like for the first 10 minutes or so, it just seemed like a generic RPG to me. While you're going through the beginning area of the game, basically you're going through a prison. Then after you kind of go through, and a major event happens in the beginning of the game where the character that is breaking you out of prison essentially is killed, and that sets up the entire story of the game. Basically, they give you a key and say, hey, get through the sewers, and then the world is basically yours. So for me, I get through the sewers and everything, get the key, all that stuff happens, and then I get out into the world. And my biggest defining memories of video games are always going to be the things with like Super Mario World and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. But for me, one of the biggest, because it really transitioned me back into video games in a huge way, was leaving the prison in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion for the first time, and just the jaw-dropping moment of walking out, seeing how big this world is, looking around it and going, I can go anywhere. I can do anything. And just realizing how big this game is for me. I'm going to be honest, it ruined an entire semester of college for me. Really, grades suffered. I lost myself to this game in a big and bad way. And it was pretty much all I played from March when it came out through that summer. I played other games during this time, and there were definitely other experiences and stuff that I had, but for me, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was like my thing, and that's all I played, and that's all I wanted to do. And I just kept playing the game and just really enjoyed it. And for me, it's always going to be my personal favorite Elder Scrolls game. I'm also a big fan of Skyrim, don't get me wrong. I really like Skyrim. I think Skyrim is more easy and accessible for newcomers to the series than Oblivion. Oblivion was kind of the sweet spot between Morrowind being kind of the hardcore for hardcore fans of the franchise, and then Skyrim is kind of like the easy place where you can jump in and do this. Oblivion's kind of like a good middle ground for that stuff. So as I said before, the game was released on March 20th, 2006 for Xbox 360 and PC. And obviously, a lot of my time originally was spent on the 360 version of the game. And obviously, this whole show is about the 360 generation. But I did also spend a chunk of time with this game on the PC, thanks to mods and stuff. And obviously, a big thing about the Elder Scrolls franchise is the ability to mod the game and put different things that other people have created into it. It really opens the game up. And in Elder Scrolls, there is a big province where everything takes place, and that is called Tamriel. Each game is kind of named after the region that the game is set in. So obviously there's Daggerfall, there's Morrowind. Oblivion is one of the only games in this franchise that is not named after the actual region that it is set in. It is named after what's going on, like with the story. So, like for example, like Skyrim is named after the Skyrim region that the game takes place in, but Oblivion takes place in the region named Cyrodiil. And I honestly think the reason for this was it would look stupid for the box to say Elder Scrolls 4 Cyrodiil than Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. But there's a huge map for the game, and the game takes place over this huge and gigantic map. And there's different regions, so each game. So Morrowind takes place in Morrowind, and so on. One other very interesting thing about this franchise is that this is the first game in the franchise to feature fully voiced NPCs. This was the first time they did it. This is also a first for Jeremy Soule doing the music of Oblivion, and then he did return and do the music for Skyrim. And he's also known for doing a bunch of other great video game soundtracks. Oblivion continues the idea of playing in first person and third person. You can kind of scroll and do what you want. For me, I've always enjoyed playing these games in first person, but it is fun to play in third person as well. So the footage that I've captured for this episode of the game has been primarily the PC version of the game. That's just the easier one to capture from, and it's the one that's going to look the most pretty. But Elder Scrolls 4 is a 10-year-old, actually 11-year-old game now, and obviously it's been improved upon with Skyrim and Fallout. Like, they're using the same engine necessarily, but it's an improved upon engine, and I'm hoping that with taking the time and making other games an experience at Bethesda, that they will create a new engine for their next big experience, because that would be really, really cool of them. The size of Cyrodiil is 16 square miles, which is nuts. And like I said, it's the kind of thing where up to the point when the game came out, it hadn't been done yet, really. Not on that grand of a scale. We had other open world games. As I said with the announcement of The Greatest Generation, one of my first memories of an open world game, and it's a silly one when I mention it, but it struck a chord with me at the time, and it's why I have such a fascination with open world games and stuff, is Smuggler's Run for PS2 was one of the first games that I remember where I sat down and just realized, like, hey, I can drive over to that mountain. I can drive over that mountain and over that cliff and stuff and keep going. And there was a sense of size and space. And then obviously things like Grand Theft Auto 3, highly influential for open world games, and then obviously its sequels, Vice City and San Andreas, and that kind of stuff. So open world was something I really got excited about, but I think Oblivion is what really ignited my passion for open world games and everything, and just the size and the scope. And obviously, other games have done it, and like, yes, for sure, like Oblivion was the game that really knocked it out of the park for me and really brought me back into loving open world RPGs. And obviously we've had other ones like, Skyrim and Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and even to a lesser extent other lesser known games that aren't remembered as well, or stuff like, Grand Theft Auto 4, Grand Theft Auto 5, and even Red Dead Redemption. All games that have huge open worlds, but none of them really got me the same way that Oblivion did. And maybe it's just because that was my first real true experience with an open world game to that big of an extent, even more so than something like Grand Theft Auto 3 or, I keep saying Smuggler's Run. And as I've said, many times, the only other game that's come close to it, recent memory and extremely recent memory, is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But for me, Oblivion is always going to be remembered for those first experiences that I had with it, and then the time that I spent with it and invested in it, and just all the exploring and learning new things about it, learning different ways to play it. I played over 100 hours of this game without ever picking up a bow and arrow. Kind of just played as a warrior, essentially, and just run around knifing and using a knife and a shield and cutting people that way and stuff. I didn't really play with the bow and arrow. I didn't do a lot of sneaking and stuff. In fact, my first playthrough of the game, I played it with the difficulty slider all the way down, and I think by the end of it, I only was like level 10. And that's one of the things that was actually kind of jacked in this game compared to Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, is that the difficulty slider was not implemented very well here, and that's something they really fixed with Elder Scrolls Skyrim. So in this game, you have a difficulty slider, and if you slide it down, it just pretty much makes every enemy you kill like almost a one hit, maybe 1 or 2 hits, but it makes everything easy. But the problem with doing that is then you don't earn as much experience, so your character's not leveling up enough. And Oblivion has like a weird leveling up system where the higher level you get, the more intense the enemies are that you face. It's not that, and what's weird about it is it's not like a typical game where, okay, these enemies are just more leveled up. You actually get new and different enemies and enemy types and stuff in areas. So like there's a Minotaur enemy that you won't even see unless you're like level 20 or level 30 or something like that. So it was a weird and interesting system that they implemented. For me, it was just such a different experience. I've always been a fan of RPGs, but I didn't really have the experience with an RPG like this until I played Oblivion, and it really ignited my love for these Western RPGs, and it's such a different thing for the genre. I grew up with obviously playing things like Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo, and then obviously the big one for everybody, and I know it's overrated for a lot of people, but I'll always call it my favorite Final Fantasy, which is 7, and then my second favorite is 8. But those are turn-based, and that's what I grew up playing. So to play something like this is a totally different experience and a very much different RPG style than what I was used to at the time. Actually, one of the most interesting things for me as I sat down to capture footage and stuff for this game is I stumbled across a mission I never did, and I'm someone who I tried to tally up my total save time by going back to the 360 version of the game, going to the PC version of the game and stuff, and I've probably spent somewhere upwards of like 700 hours playing this game, and for whatever, and I can't obviously claim that I've seen every single thing in the game, like that would be impossible. I actually stumbled upon a weird mission involving pirates in this game capture footage that I never experienced, never played in any of my playthroughs of this game, which is really crazy. And that's part of the footage that I'm showing here. It's interesting. That's something I never did. Now, obviously, in this PC version, I don't have my original PC save because that was on an older PC from years ago. So this is just footage from the Steam version, which I'm obviously, as you look at the footage, I'm not very high level. I have barely played the PC version of the game on this computer. It's just a testament to see exactly how crazy this game is, and you can learn and experience so many things that there's going to be things that you never knew that were in the game. And for me to experience something that a game from 11 years ago that I played through to death and did not see at all is really crazy. Oblivion's also interesting, and this is the same for all Elder Scrolls games, but they have different books and stuff you can pick up and read, like different things about the lore in the game. It's a very, very immersive game that way. You can get sucked into so many different things in these games. Oblivion's a really good example of it, and so is Skyrim as well. Final thing I want to note with this game is Oblivion is part of the Xbox One backwards compatibility with 360. So you don't have to have a PC to play this game. It is probably the best way to play this game, honestly. But even on the PC, even running it on my PC, which I have a GTX 1070 video card, I still encounter frame rate issues. And it's just the game was always janky. There's a level of jankiness to Bethesda games that is always kind of expected, I guess, at that point. But it's always been something that's also been kind of forgiven by the general gaming community because their games are so big and vast and open that it's par for the course with these games. So, but the very nice thing I will say is that you can go to a GameStop or Amazon or something, you can pick up Oblivion. I think you can pick this version up of, obviously you're not going to be able to get the collector's edition readily anymore. That was something that was a collector's edition 11 years ago. But you should be able to pick up the game for a fairly decent price now. I think it goes for like $15, if that. And if you've never experienced Oblivion, especially if you've never experienced a Elder Scrolls game at all, I highly recommend you start here rather than with Skyrim. I just think you'll get more out of it going from this to that, and especially there's no way you can go backwards. Because this game holds such a special place in my heart, gaming in general, and for me, kind of returning to console games after having such a huge absence, it's easy for me to go back and forth between them, but for the average person, it's not going to be. It is definitely an aged game at this point, but I think it's a very important game. Especially for me, it brought me back into consoles, and it really kicked off what I feel is the greatest generation, as I've said before with the Xbox 360 stuff. So anyways, I thank you for watching this today. Thanks for reminiscing with me on Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. I hope you found this, a fun trip down memory lane if you've ever played this game, or if you haven't, you can go out and pick it up and experience it for the first time for yourself. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and until next time.